PreCalc. You're watching this video after Tuesday's class, preparing for Wednesday's review. So you should be writing this down on that orange or yellow paper, sunrise papers, that I gave you this in class today, so you can follow along quickly. We're starting with number 18. If you don't have that red yellow paper, you could just write them down again in your comp book. So we're going to find the exact value of the cosecant of the arctan of 8/15. Alright, when you have a situation like this, you want to go into the inner court first, and that's inside the parentheses, and find the arctan of 8/15. The arctan of 8/15 will be found by drawing a triangle that has that tangent. So, here we go. Right triangle. Tangent of this angle is opposite over adjacent. So the side opposite the angle, adjacent. And now we have to come up with this number right there. So working over on the side, we've got, we'll call that C, 15 squared plus 8 squared equals C squared. So I'm going to calculate that real quick. 15 squared plus 8 squared equals 289. And the square root of 289 is 17. So it's nice it came out even. It won't always. Alright, so we know C is 17. Alright, so now I have this triangle completed, and I want the cosecant of this angle in this triangle. Cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite. It's the flip of sine. So we're going to grab the hypotenuse over side opposite. Excuse me, 17/8. Alright, 17/8 is that answer. This is number 18. If you were following in your comp book, you might not be at number 18. We were one off because I had accidentally skipped one. So, alright. Looking at the answer key for this one, that is not one of our options. So let me see. Cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite. Hypotenuse over opposite. Okay. The answer they gave was hypotenuse over adjacent. 17/15. But that is the secant. So hypotenuse over adjacent. Okay, I'm going with my answer again. We found several glitches in this exercise, so we are stronger than that. Alright, again, once you draw the triangle from this information, you take the cosecant of this angle with this information. So it's hypotenuse over opposite. 17/8. Alright, next one. Number 19, you have the triangles already drawn for you. And again, if you don't have this handout, just go ahead and sketch it from what I'm doing. Alright, these numbers have already been assigned, and this is angle B. And the question is find angle B to 2 decimal places. So, find angle B. Alright, so I'm looking for this angle, so I want a trig function that will help me do that. It will involve this angle, side adjacent, and side hypotenuse. That suggests cosine. So I'm going to make a statement about cosine. Cosine of angle B equals side adjacent over hypotenuse. So to find out what angle has this as its cosine, I go to the cosine inverse key of 8/20. Okay, now I'm going to do that. I got 66.42 degrees. All right, I see that as selection C if you're following along on the paper, which I will check now. 19 is C. All right, so it's correct. All right, 1 to 20. Use the fundamental identities to simplify. All right. So we have lots of IDs, I think like 30 some. And I have secant, I'm going to use theta, sine theta over tangent theta. One of the strategies that I expect you to remember is to change everything to sine and cosine. So secant is 1 over cosine, and sine is sine, and tangent is sine over cosine. I'm going to take this fraction and move it so that I'm going to flip it and multiply by the reciprocal. So that still gives me 1 over cosine out here. And then, oops, not equals, times sine theta times the reciprocal, cosine theta over sine theta. All right, so now sine, sine, cosine, cosine. We end up with a 1. Is that one of our selections? It is. All right, B. Let me see if that's correct. I have an answer key. It is not correct. Jeepers. All right, let's check my work just to make sure. Secant, sine over tangent. Secant is 1 over cosine. Sine over tangent. Flip it and multiply. I get sine. Oh, I see. No, I don't see. So they got A. I must be looking. No, I am looking at the right answer key. They did not get that. All right. Does anyone sees a discrepancy here? When I flip this sine and this cosine cancel. All right, I'm going with it. So, all right, on 21, we're not going to let a little thing like the answer key bother us. You are supposed to factor and simplify, basically. So, oh, I know what's happened here. The question said which one is following is not equivalent. Okay, so I won't do that on the test. I will just ask you to simplify. So if you notice on number 20, it says determine which of the following is not equivalent. So this is equivalent to 1, so that is correct. And sine plus cosine is 1, and if I look at my other trig IDs, another 2 of these is also equal to 1. So the only one that's not equal to 1 is A. All right, so I see what they were doing. They weren't wrong. I just didn't answer the question the way it was presented. All right, on the next one, the same thing. I'm not going to ask it like that. I'm going to say simplify. So cotangent theta, cosine squared theta. So I cotangent squared theta, cosine squared theta, minus cotangent squared theta. And to simplify this, I notice they have the same term in it, so I'm going to factor out a cotangent squared. And from this term I have left cosine minus 1. Cosine squared minus 1 is the same as, let's see, sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. So if I keep the cosine on this side, get cosine squared theta, move the 1 over, that matches that, and this sine squared would come over here. So manipulating that until I have cosine squared, there's a plus sign, hard to see in here. So if I move this over here and that over there, I have cosine theta minus 1. So therefore I can substitute in minus sine squared. So now I'm going to use the strategy, switch to sine and cosine. So I get cosine squared theta, tangent is cosine over sine, and a minus sine squared. Sine squared, but this minus is still there, so I get minus cosine squared of theta. So on 21, let's see, that is correct. They asked it a different way, but I'm looking at the simplified version. There it is. All right, on 22, it says verify. The others would simplify, excuse me, tangent theta plus cotangent theta equals secant cosecant. So the strategy I'm going to use is to switch everything to sine and cosine. Tangent is sine over cosine, and cotangent is cosine over sine. All right, I'm going to stay working on this side until it looks like that. I'm going to give these the same denominator by multiplying this by sine over sine, and this one by cosine over cosine. Do you see that gives us the common denominator, sine cosine? And on the top now I have a sine squared and a cosine squared. Sine squared plus cosine squared is 1. And I can split this up because it's multiplied. I can do that. And I know this is secant and this is cosecant. So I got to what I wanted. I verified it. All right, that was 22. All right, I'm going to make this in more than one part, so hopefully it'll upload quickly. All right, so I'll see you on part 2.